I know it's early days, we haven't even turned a wheel here in Melbourne, but can we talk about goals for the season for you? What's a realistic ambition?
The goal's to win. That's what of course everyone's working towards, every team is, but that's our goal, is to maximize on every opportunity, to be lean, to be hopefully fighting in the top group, hopefully in the first races, as we don't really know if Mercedes look particularly quick, and I'm not really sure whether or not we've seen the full unleashed Red Bull yet. So it's really, really exciting, but I do know that whatever the case, I feel like I've got a great group of people behind me who are head down, focused on bringing performance and really maximizing from everything.
The context surrounding Ferrari before the Australian Grand Prix is much more complex than it seems at first glance, because although the Bahrain tests left very positive feelings for the Italian team, within Maranello they know perfectly well that the preseason rarely tells the whole story. The SF26 took to the track showing something that Ferrari had been looking for a long time: a balanced, consistent car capable of completing long runs without reliability problems. During the tests, the team accumulated an enormous number of kilometers and practically fulfilled the entire planned technical program, something that in itself is already a very strong signal when we talk about such a profound change in regulations. But what is really interesting is not only what the car showed, but how their own drivers reacted to those results. Because far from celebrating or insinuating that Ferrari arrives as a favorite, both Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc began to construct a much more cautious speech that has surprised a large part of the paddock. Charles Leclerc was the first to set the tone for that narrative. After completing the tests in Bahrain, the Monegasque driver openly acknowledged that the performance of the SF26 had been very positive and that the car had been very fluid in practically all the conditions tested. In addition, Ferrari achieved something that in previous seasons had been a real problem. The correlation between the simulator and the track seems to be working much better than in the past, meaning that the data they generate in Maranello is now reflected much more reliably when the car goes out to run on a real circuit. This detail is much more important than it seems, because for several years Ferrari suffered precisely from this disconnection between its development tools and the real behavior of the car, something that greatly complicated the evolution of the car throughout the season. However, even after acknowledging all those positive signs, Leclerc repeatedly insisted that it is still impossible to know where Ferrari really stands compared to the rest of the teams. The reason for that caution is quite simple and perfectly reflects how modern Formula One works. In pre-season testing, each team follows completely different programs. Some hide performance by using very high fuel loads, others limit engine modes, and some simply focus on collecting aerodynamic data without seeking competitive times. This means that the times that appear on the table at the end of the day can be completely misleading. Ferrari, for example, managed to set a very competitive time with Leclerc using C4 tires, a record that immediately caught the attention of analysts and rival teams. But within the team, no one wanted to jump to conclusions, because they know that these types of times do not always reflect the true competitive order of the grid. Still, what Bahrain did make clear is that the SF26 has an extremely solid foundation. The car responded well to configuration changes, showed stability under braking, and above all, allowed the drivers to complete long runs without unpredictable behavior. That consistency is essential in a season that is shaping up to be one of the most unpredictable in recent years, since the new regulations introduce important changes in the way the cars manage aerodynamics and energy. When a team manages to start a technical era with a balanced and reliable car, it usually means they have a very powerful platform to build on for the rest of the championship. However, this is where the second protagonist of this story comes in: Lewis Hamilton. The arrival of the seven-time world champion to Ferrari not only represents one of the most shocking moves in the recent history of Formula One, but has also completely changed the internal dynamics of the project. Hamilton arrived at Maranello with enormous experience accumulated after more than a decade at Mercedes, and from the first moment he made it clear that his objective is not simply to adapt to the team, but to actively influence the construction of the car and the technical direction of the project. In fact, during the conversations prior to his signing, Ferrari had already presented him with a long-term plan for the new era of Formula One, a plan that revolved around the development of the engine and the aerodynamic concept of the car. That is why Hamilton's statements after the tests have also been analyzed with a magnifying glass. The Briton spoke enthusiastically about the potential of the project and how exciting this new stage could be, but at the same time he hinted that there is still a lot of work ahead before Ferrari can truly consider itself ready to fight for the championship. Hamilton specifically mentioned that he has been involved in discussions relating to the car's stability under braking, a key aspect of maximizing tire performance and allowing drivers to confidently attack corner entry areas. These types of comments reveal something very interesting. Hamilton is already influencing the technical direction of the car's development, something that demonstrates the weight he has within the team even before competing in his first full season dressed in red. And that is precisely why Hamilton and Leclerc's combined message has generated so much conversation within the paddock. Because when two drivers of that level agree on such a cautious speech just after an apparently positive preseason, it usually means that within the team they are very aware that there are still variables that could completely change the outlook when the season really starts. The Australian Grand Prix will be the first moment in which all the teams show their true performance, without hiding fuel, without testing programs, and without excuses. And Ferrari knows full well that what happened in Bahrain may just be the prologue to a very different story when the lights go out in Melbourne. The real question, however, remains the same one that the drivers themselves mentioned after Bahrain. No one really knows where each team is until the first qualifying of the season arrives. In testing, everyone hides cards, everyone experiments with setups, and everyone tries to protect their true performance. The Australian Grand Prix is the moment when that mask finally falls. When the cars take to the track in Melbourne with minimum fuel and maximum engine mode, the real order of the grid begins to reveal itself. And it is precisely there that Ferrari will have to demonstrate whether the quiet optimism generated by the SF26 in Bahrain becomes a real threat to the rest of the grid, or if the warnings from Hamilton and Leclerc were actually a sign that the team is still closer to the beginning of its project than its moment of glory. At this point the story reaches its most important moment, because everything that Ferrari showed in Bahrain and everything that Hamilton and Leclerc have hinted at in their statements inevitably leads to the same question. What is really going to happen when the season starts in Australia? Testing is always a field full of unknowns, but the Melbourne Grand Prix is the place where it is finally discovered who was hiding their true potential and who was simply interpreting a preseason too well. And Ferrari knows it perfectly. That is why the prudent discourse that its drivers have constructed is not a coincidence, but the reflection of a team that has learned not to blindly trust first impressions. However, there is one detail that many within the paddock are starting to point out, and that could explain why Ferrari seems so cautious. The new regulations have changed key aspects of the car's performance, especially in the way aerodynamics and energy management interact. This means that some cars can behave very differently depending on the circuit. Bahrain is a very particular track with long straights, strong braking zones, and relatively open corners. Melbourne, on the other hand, presents a completely different scenario. A semi-permanent urban circuit with fast corners, constant changes of direction, and an asphalt that evolves a lot throughout the weekend. In other words, a car that works perfectly in Bahrain may face a completely different challenge in Australia. And this is where Hamilton's words make even more sense. When the Briton talks about the SF26 as having a good basis for building a championship car, he is recognizing the potential of the project, but at the same time he makes it clear that it is still just that, a base. In modern Formula One, the true performance of a car is discovered when the development cycle begins during the season, when each team introduces aerodynamic improvements, adjusts the mechanical balance, and learns to exploit every detail of the technical package. Ferrari seems to have started down that path with a solid car, but the real challenge will be maintaining that competitiveness race after race. Furthermore, the pressure surrounding the Italian team never goes away. Ferrari is not simply another team within the paddock. It is an institution within Formula One, a team that carries decades of history and the constant expectation of millions of fans around the world. Every season begins with the same question. Will this finally be the year that Ferrari wins the championship again? And that pressure intensifies even more when the team shows signs of competitiveness from the beginning. That's why Hamilton and Leclerc know that every word they speak can influence the narrative surrounding the team all year long. What's interesting is that, for the first time in a long time, Ferrari appears to be approaching that pressure in a different way. Instead of promising results or fueling tifosi enthusiasm ahead of time, the team is taking a much more strategic and realistic approach. They prefer to let the car's performance speak for itself on the track. They prefer to calmly analyze each race, each evolution, and each piece of information before making grandiose statements. And that mentality could be precisely one of the keys that determine the success or failure of the project in this new era of Formula 1.0. When the lights go out at the Australian Grand Prix, it won't just start a new season. The real test will also begin for Ferrari, for Hamilton, and for Leclerc. That moment will reveal if the SF26 is really the car capable of returning Maranello to the fight for the title, or if, on the contrary, the cautious warnings from its pilots were a sign that the road to the top is still longer than many imagine. Because in the end, in Formula 1, tests can generate expectations, but only races reveal the truth. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.